Alrighty, to my family at the family table, I say welcome back to the Daily Liberation Through Our Eyes, where we don't just scroll past headlines. We try to study the soul of what those headlines really mean and what they're really revealing. And we want to look through the lenses, black lenses, an ancestral lens, a lens of liberation. So I want to welcome you back to another daily dose of liberation. So every morning, the world will hand us chaos and it calls it news. And we're told what to fear. We're told what to hate. We're even told what to ignore. But here at this particular table, we particularly show you and we slow it down. We listen for the undertones beneath all of the noise and ask, what does this mean for our people's minds? What does it mean for our people's bodies? What does it mean for our people's spirit? Because the news cycle really does more than bring information. It also conditions our nervous systems. And if we don't recenter ourselves, what we do is we end up living in a reactionary space instead of having the space of revelation to be able to come to us. So tonight, I want to breathe, exhale that tension of another unsteady week, and let's just remind ourselves that we are not powerless witnesses to this falling empire. We are actually the descendants of those who built and outlived empires that have fallen before. So in this moment, it feels unstable because, let's be honest, it is government shutdowns. Okay, there are political fractures, diplomatic humiliations and hallucinations. Old systems are crumbling under the weight of their own lies. Okay, but remember, collapse is not the same as defeat, y'all. Sometimes things happen and things fall so truth can stand on its own. And I want y'all to hear that. Some things have to fall so that truth can stand. So tonight I want to walk through a couple of stories that seem kind of disconnected, but they are first Marjorie Taylor Greene and her public break from the Make America Great people. Then we have Mike Johnson and his panic over these nationwide protests. And then, of course, Trump's humiliation abroad in Israel and the quiet plans to criminalize dissent from your regime. But beneath all of that runs one current, and it's a desperate grip on power from those who fear a people who have been liberated from out of their grips. So wherever you are, you can be in your car, you might be listening to this on the 14th, you might be on a walk, folding laundry after this long day. Tonight, let's breathe together and let's study some patterns and let's learn to see clearly as a form of freedom. So our first headline here was talking about Washington, okay? And we're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course. And she was at one time one of Trump's loudest cheerleaders. She is suddenly talking about and preaching the word about the corruption of his movement. Now, cameras were able to catch her leaving meetings with Steve Bannon several times. And now, as you all know, or you might not know, that Steve Bannon is the architect of the very machine she now claims to critique. I said claim. I said that very seriously. We cannot be fooled about this. When people like MTG, bleach, blonde, built, bad bush body, start talking about saving the republic, they're not having a change of heart, my dears. They are changing strategy. Power is shape shifting. And she's learning how to look like reform while protecting the rotten inside, the rotten core of everything that she has stood for and voted for. So one thing that Greene has always done is she's always thrived on chaos. But now that Trump's legal and political armor is cracking up, she's attempting to rebrand herself as quote unquote, the voice of real MAGA, or the voice of real Republicans. That is not a repentant state. That is repositioning. That is a Trojan horse movement. And it's a way to keep the same ideology alive under a different banner. That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing. So what's dangerous about that is that many people will believe her just because they want to believe someone on the inside finally gets it. But I want y'all to hear this. We must practice the art of discernment. Not every voice of critique is a voice of liberation, y'all. And sometimes it's just another actor changing costumes, as this party is prone to do, to keep the play going. And that's exactly what's going on. So for us, this moment is like a mirror, and it shows how quickly systems of control can mutate when their leaders feel threatened. And it's also why Black people must stay rooted in self-knowledge and community care. Okay, I've said it many times, and I'm going to continue to say it. Because we have to think, when the political class starts to eat itself, they are going to try to feed on the poor and on the powerless next. And you know, we Black, we've always been the one they fed on first. So we don't watch because we want to see gossip, but we watch because we want to see patterns. And that pattern is clear. White supremacist ideology never dies of natural causes. It finds new hosts, okay? So our task is to build immune systems of truth and of solidarity so it cannot infect us again. So survival without soul is not success, okay? Green's maneuvering is about self-preservation and not about people's liberation. And while they fight to keep their thrones, we are fighting to keep our peace and our purpose. So I want y'all to keep that in mind. So I want to take a pause here and offer a word about fear, okay? Not the emotion we feel when we're facing danger, though, but the condition in which systems teach us to live in, okay? So my book, Fear, It's Not an Option. Okay, it was born out of years of watching how trauma becomes policy and how policy becomes fear. This is available now through my Substack at tanyaalcoholic.substack.com. And I wrote it for those of us who have been taught that caution is wisdom when in reality it's conditioning. Okay? I want y'all to hear that. Caution is conditioning. And in our community especially, fear has been passed down like heirloom china, so to speak. We're told to be grateful instead of great. We're told to be quiet instead of questioning. We're told to be humble instead of being whole. But there comes a time in our lives when every one of us must decide that our peace is worth the risk of being misunderstood, misinterpreted. Okay? So this book, Fear, It's Not an Option, it walks through that decision, and it invites you to sit with the physiology of terror and transform it into the chemistry of courage. So, and I want you to remember that every moment or every movement for justice, from Harriet Tubman to today, started with somebody saying, I feel the fear, but I'm going anyway. Okay? Y'all see this? This book is for every Black reader who feels stuck between calling and comfort. It's a handbook for the heart. It's a spiritual manual for the moment we're living in, actually. And as And as the world shakes, you'll need tools that remind you who you are when all of the noise gets extremely loud. So, because fear is a liar, but truth always calls you by name. So pick up my book, my first book, Fear It's Not an Option, so that you can walk through the process of coming away from conditioning to becoming who you really are. Okay? All right, I hope you've had some water. Go ahead and stretch your shoulders a little bit. Let that last segment settle for a little bit. So we're just getting started, okay? So in a moment, we're going to turn towards the halls of Congress and, of course, towards the streets of America as well. Two spaces telling the same story from different angles. One is trying to preserve power. The other, is trying to restore people. Okay? So I want you to think about that. One space is trying to preserve power. Another is trying to restore people. So I want you to stay with me in this. So you're listening today to the Daily Liberation Through Our Eyes. And this next story is really about what happens when fear of the people meets the power of the people. Okay, so for a moment, let's step back into the room. Speaker Mike Johnson has, of course, been pacing the floor of Congress, warning that America stands on the edge of the longest shutdown in history. And he blames protest movements. He blames community organizers and the very people crying out for relief for the shutdown. But beneath that panic is the sound of footsteps. Our footsteps. The marches being planned across this nation are not about chaos. They're about conscience. But Johnson calls this a threat to stability. I call it evidence that the soul of the people is still alive. I hope the soul of the people is alive. You blacks, stay at home. For centuries, whenever powerful people have felt pressure from below them, they've redefined protest as a problem. From Montgomery to Minneapolis, they've called our calls for justice riots, while calling their coups law and order. And yet every freedom we have ever had came from a crowd of people that refused to shut up and go home. Everything has come from these rights. So right now, organizers are preparing for what some are calling the largest protest in modern U.S. history, the No Kings March on a great day, October 18th. So people of every generation, every region are uniting to say, we are done being ruled by the whims of the few. And that's what the No Kings March is all about. Okay? So as the government may be shut down, the people are still opening their mouths. Like the song says, open your mouth and say something. And I believe that terrifies those who built their power based upon a space of silence that they want us to remain in. So when Mike Moses Johnson warns that protest will quote unquote destabilize the nation, what he really means is that it will destabilize control, because control depends on obedience, and obedience depends on fear. When citizens remember that democracy is participatory, not a spectator sport, the game changes every time. And so for us in Black America, This is not just a political theory, y'all. It is survival practice, and we know how to do that very well. So our grandmothers and our grandfathers did not march because it was fashionable. They marched because rent was due. They marched because sons were missing. They marched because a future was waiting to be born. We were waiting to be born, and every chant was both prayer and a plan. But once again, y'all, us, stay home. But I want you to look close at this moment. Teachers going without paychecks. Families are wondering if food assistance will arrive. Federal workers, the checkings and savings accounts that were never meant to be safety nets have become safety nets. Shutdowns are not neutral events. They are economic warfare against people who have to work just to make ends meet. And since we, the working class, I am part of the working class, we're part of this class in this country, mostly wear a black and brown face, we share the heaviest cost of this, okay? So while so many people and pundits argue about polling numbers, we have to ask, what does justice really look like when the lights are off? What kind of country lets millions starve to prove a point? Republicans. No. Excuse me. MAGA Republicans. But here's the miracle. Even in crisis, we organize. Mutual aid funds, they are rising. Churches are opening pantries. Barbershops are collecting diapers. We learn to do what we've always had to do. We turn despair into design. And that is the psychology of liberation in action. Where we convert anxiety into agency. And remember this, when they say protest changes nothing, protest changes us. And changed people change everything else in the world. So, to Mr. Mike Moses Johnson, I'd say this. The people are not the problem. The people are actually the prophecy. And you cannot shut down or shut up a prophecy. Keep that in mind, Mr. Johnson. So, before we go any further, I want to share something that helps us hold steady in the storm. My other book, Positive Daily Affirmations for BIPOC, Black Indigenous People of Color. And it was written for mornings, something like this, when the headline screams scarcity and your spirit forgets abundance. Okay? You can find it on my Substack, like my other book, at tanyaalcoholic.substack.com. Okay? And I just want to go through. Yeah, you see? So this book is a small thing with big intention. Each affirmation is a seed, and when you speak that, you plant it in the soil of your mind, and you water it through repetition. You expose it to the light by actions, and in time, it grows into the kind of confidence no empire can uproot. Okay? Scripture tells us that death and life are in the power of the tongue. What that means is every word that we utter shapes our atmosphere. And so when you tell yourself, I am worthy of rest, heaven is able to hear that. Okay? When you whisper, I deserve safety, your nervous system, it begins to release and unclench. And when you declare, my joy is not negotiable, oppression loses one more foothold over your life. So, too often, we have been trained to weaponize language against ourselves. So we say I'm tired and we forget to add, but I'm still here. So like Miss Seeley did. You remember? In The Color Purple. So, and we say I can't, but we neglect to remember the ancestors who can and did. So positive affirmations for BIPOC starts to retrain that habit. It is not toxic positivity. It's truthful power. So because to speak well of yourself as a black person in a world built on your erasure, it's not vanity. That, my dear, is victory. So each page pairs with a declaration, okay, with a practice. So I am enough, okay, becomes a breathing exercise, okay, and I trust my becoming becomes some kind of journaling prompt, and I will not mistake stillness for stagnation. Becomes permission to rest without guilt, y'all. Without guilt. Rest without guilt. So this isn't just a book. It's a mirror that begins to talk back and reminds you that your mouth is a microphone for creation. Okay? So when you begin your day shaping words, instead of letting the world shape you, the entire rhythm of your life can begin to shift. Okay? I'm just going to show you the inside of the book. I just like to show the inside. And right now, this matters so much because if we are to rebuild communities while these governments crumble, we need minds that believe in the very possibility. You cannot construct freedom from a vocabulary of defeat. So we have to learn to train our language. Donna Lawrence said it. We say the wrong things at the right times. So let your words prophesy your wellness. Okay. Welcome back. And I want you to take another breath. Let some affirmations settle somewhere deep in you. You are currently listening to Daily Liberation Through Our Eyes. This is the space where the news meets our nervous system. I like that. Don't y'all like that? And we can remember how to breathe through both. Okay? Got to. So coming up next, we're going to go overseas and we're going to cross oceans. Okay? To look at the very different kind of spectacle. Trump's trip to Israel. And this is a lesson in how power performs when it's desperate to be seen. So during the recent visit to Israel, President Khan in the White House attempted to resurrect the image of a global strongman. But the trip didn't quite go as planned. The reports describe a scene of confusion and contradiction. Netanyahu interrupted him mid-sentence. Israeli journalists laughing as of course he mixed up names of ministers and security aides rushing to correct his notes. Oh God. So what was meant to project this dominant strong man became a portrait of mental health decline. Now, why should we care about a political misstep half of the world away? Because humiliation and hubris on the world stage always echoes here in the United States, especially when it comes from a leader who worships control, feels small in public. He's going to seek to reassert that control domestically on us. And history does tell us where that energy lands. And it's always on the backs of the marginalized, i.e. black and brown people. I am a black and brown person. So then Trump returned from that trip mad, fuming. He blamed staff. He blamed deep state diplomats. He blamed anyone who wouldn't applaud loudly enough. And he stood at a rally shouting that America will never kneel again, even though no one asked her to. It's called projection. Ego disguising insecurity. Okay? So, the theology of empire always requires a spectacle. When kings feel exposed, they build bigger castles. And so, when politicians feel powerless, they start to manufacture enemies. So, y'all just expect the rhetoric of revenge to increase. Expect new crackdowns. Expect new security plans. Expect new laws to be drafted in fear of losing face. Okay? And yet, even in that, we can find revelation. Power without integrity collapses under its own echo. So, every empire eventually faces the moment when the curtain pulls back and the wizard is revealed to be a trembling man with a microphone. We know that man. So let's come back over here to the U.S. All right. So where the rhetoric is really getting dark. Okay. So certain MAGA figures are now speaking openly about rounding up traitors. They're talking open about investigating enemies of the state. They're not talking about spies, y'all. They're talking about regular people like me, critics. They're talking about journalists. They're talking about teachers. They're talking about organizers. People like you who, and me, who dare to name the truth as the truth. We have seen all of this before. In the 1960s, they call it COINTELPRO. In the 1920s, they call it the Red Scare. So, in every generation, whenever Black voices grow too coherent, they grow too connected, the state discovers a new vocabulary for fear. We talked about this before. So what's dangerous now is how normalized the language has become. So when leaders joke about gelling components, killing people, followers of that start believing they're patriotic. So when rebels chant, lock them up, mobs translate it into action. Authoritarianism does not arrive with tanks. It arrives with talking points. So let's interpret this moment from a psychological standpoint. Okay, so a regime that defines dissent as treason is not confident. It's terrified. It fears memory, our stuff. It fears art, our creation. It fears young people reading real history and realizing the emperor has no clothes. For Black America, this warning is not theoretical, y'all. From slave patrols to surveillance apps, we, of all people, know what happens when the state feels threatened by its own quote-unquote citizens. So we have to be vigilant without paranoia. And we got to evoke courage without being naive. And we got to speak boldly. But we must move wisely as well. We organize digitally. We ground physically. Go to gardens. Go to sanctuaries. In kitchens that double as think tanks, y'all. Because this liberation, it's not only about breaking chains. It's about staying unpredictable in a system that profits from predicting us. So before we move into our final reflection, I want to share another work that sits close to my heart. Okay. My book, Beyond the Margins, Reimagining Women in the Bible, will soon be available through TanyaAlcoholic.substack.com. Okay? TanyaAlcoholic.substack.com. So what this project did, it began as a whisper. What if women we were taught to pity were actually prophets? What if Eve was the first theologian of curiosity? What if Hagar wasn't cursed but commissioned? What if Mary Magdalene wasn't broken but she was brilliant? Each chapter rewrites the narrative of survival as sacred strategy. And it invites Black women specifically to see their reflection not at the edges of scripture, but at its center. That sits beyond the margins. And it's personal. When I look at sisters like Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, standing firm in rooms designed to make her shrink, I see the same lineage. Women who are carrying the weight of brilliance in spaces that punish clarity. This book, Beyond the Margins, Reimagining Women in the Bible, is my offering to every Black woman who has been told she's too much, when she's really just enough to move mountains. Okay? Y'all hear that? She's enough to move mountains. So this book is not only theology, it's therapy. And it helps us untangle shame from story, to see that the struggle against erasure is older than America itself. And it calls our brothers and our allies to listen. We don't need you to save us, but we need you to see us. We need you as witnesses. Because when we restore the stories of women erased by patriarchy, what we're doing is we're restoring balance to the human soul. And right now, balance is what the world is begging for. I just want to open it up a little bit so you can see what the inside looks like. And it's got some work books in here, work things in here as well. Let me show you. See, this is one of the work pages. I know it's backwards, but it is what it is. I want you to see that. Okay? So, help us restore women. That's what we want to do in this age. We want to help restore women to space, to centering. Center these women so that we, as Black women, can be restored to our rightful place in the world. So, welcome back. Take a breath. Maybe jot down a note or two. So, we've looked at some fractures abroad and the threats at home, and we've remembered that storytelling is not survival. In our final segment tonight, we'll gather these threads: fear, control, resistance, and we're going to face the word many are afraid to say aloud: fascism. We'll talk about how dissent becomes danger in the eyes of the empire, and how love remains our sharpest weapon. Okay, so we've walked through some shutdowns, we've walked through some protests and humiliation and the hunger for control. But let's name what ties it all together. The word the media dances around: fascism. Fascism does not arrive dressed in swastikas anymore, even though some people still do it. It comes in suits and smiles and sound bites that say God and country while meaning guns, and you comply, but I won't. It rebrands every generation: America first, law and order, patriotic movement. But its root is always the same. It's a fear of freedom disguised as faith. Look around. Books being banned, history being rewritten, curricula whitewashed, journalists branded enemies, women's bodies legislated. immigrants hunted down in the street, even those in the United States. These are not random acts. They're rehearsal. So the machinery of fascism is built in plain sight, and it's powered by public exhaustion. We tired. So when people get too tired to care, the strong man can move in very, 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 very quietly. And here's where psychology meets prophecy. Fascism tends to feed on fear, but it cannot digest love. So it requires citizens who doubt their own worth, and it depends on Black people believing our brilliance is optional. It's not. It depends on poor people believing their poverty is moral failure. It's not. The minute we reclaim worth, we can break the spell. But this week, we heard political leaders joking about rounding up critics. We saw police units drilling for civil unrest. Okay, we watched the regime stretch its power toward the military, calling commanders to Quantico for loyalty theater. That ain't normal bureaucracy. That's a strategy of intimidation, y'all. And Trump and his lieutenants and that crazy fool berated officers whose oath was to defend the Constitution, not defend the man. And Hegseth reportedly told them to, quote unquote, harden up and, quote unquote, treat trainees like they're in war. That is the language of indoctrination, and it's not discipline, okay? So let's name the danger clearly. When these soldiers are taught to see citizens as threats, democracy dies by friendly fire. And when politicians mock accountability, they plant the seed of dictatorship. And so when silence feels safer than truth, we have lost our freedom, y'all. Keep speaking. And yet, even here, our people know how to survive regimes. We've been the test case for every authoritarian experiment this land has ever run. Chattel slavery was fascism. Jim Crow was fascism. Redlining, mass incorporation, forced sterilization, forced STDs, fascism. So when we see it now, we do not panic. We prepare. We stock our communities with food and wisdom. Okay? We build mutual aid networks like we've been doing. We teach our children their history before the state edits it out of textbooks, and we save all that stuff. We pray, but we also plan. Okay? So this is why I keep telling my Black brothers and my Black sisters, stay out of the armed forces that won't love you when you come back home, because it has been seen before. So understand, when tyrants command the troops, loyalty becomes a loaded gun pointed toward you. And they'd rather see you fighting your own neighbors than fighting against the tyranny in their house. Okay? And to you so-called allies in power, Jeffries, Schumer, Booker, all of y'all who claim moral high ground, but whisper while democracy burns, hear this with respect and with clarity. Silence is complicity. Your caution feeds the beast. You cannot compromise with fascism. It always eats the compromiser first. And history will not remember your civility. Don't be civil anymore. It will remember your cowardice. Keep that in mind. And I hope y'all see this. But here's the good news. Because we always have good news, right? We have something fascism cannot counterfeit. We got soul. Like, Jimmy, give me that soul. You can mimic culture, but you cannot mass produce consciousness. Every time we dance, drum, heal, laugh, teach, create, we loosen empire's grip. Joy is civil disobedience. Rest is rebellion. Love is a strategy. Okay? So tonight I'm asking you not to be in despair, but to decide. Decide that your peace is going to be precious. Decide that your voice will not disappear into the algorithmic silence. Decide that no matter what laws they pass, your community will not unlove itself, because fascism ends the very moment the people remember they are divine. You are divine. So we were trying to do some heavy stuff tonight, right? So, but liberation is never just critique. It is construction. We break the old not to live among ruins, but to build something worthy of our children's laughter. I believe the children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. So as we close, let's gather ourselves, okay? Place a hand over your heart. Feel that beat. That's the sound of a nation that has not given up, okay? And I want you to repeat quietly, if you can. I am not afraid. I am aware. I'm awake. I am still becoming. I want you to remember that rest is not retreat. It's rehearsal for resurrection. And also remember that every good thing our people ever received came because somebody refused to sit quietly. Remember that community care is the economy of the future. And remember that the empire can't program what it doesn't understand. Your joy and your creativity and your love, it can't control it because they don't understand it. So I want you to breathe easy tonight. You are seen, you are necessary. And no matter what tomorrow's headlines scream, your story is not finished. So until next time, keep your mind sharp, keep your spirit soft, and your hands ready for the work. My name is Dr. Tanya Alcoholic, and this has been Daily Liberation Through Our Eyes. Don't forget to breathe. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Family Table Podcast and all of our various ecosystems. As you all know, this is a grassroots initiative, and we rely on the generous support of listeners and contributors like you to help grow and sustain this movement. And here are a couple of ways that you can help us to continue to build this impactful ecosystem, okay? First and foremost, you can engage and you can share, okay? Spread the word about the Family Table by sharing our content with your various networks. Also, please consider following us on social media under @AllThingsTanya on Instagram and TikTok. That is @AllThingsTanya, both on Instagram and on TikTok. And use our hashtag #TheFamilyTableNC to engage with the conversation. You can also join our new Facebook community that we are starting to grow and build. You can like and follow that group. It is called the Family Table NC. And just show your support by giving us stars and sharing our page as we continue to develop that group as well. And finally, if you want to contribute financially, you're more than welcome to do so. And you can support our work by making a monetary donation to help cover production costs, enhance quality content, and expand our reach as well. You can do that through our Cash App, which is $SWIFT18. That's $SWYFT18. And you can tag that for the Family Table NC. Additionally, we do have options for Zelle and Venmo as well. If you'd like that information, you can contact us at the group. Your contributions and your engagement, they not only help sustain this podcast, but also help to amplify our shared vision for unity, healing, and growth within our communities, of course. So every share, every donation, and every review matters. And we deeply appreciate your commitment to this journey that you're taking alongside us. Thank you so much for being a part of our family, and understand that together we can overcome to see the results at the family table. Let's build together, okay? So for information on questions or collaborations, you can contact us via email at thgbusinessconsulting@gmail.com. That is thgbusinessconsulting@gmail.com. Once again, that is T as in Thomas, H as in hard, G as in girl, businessconsulting@gmail.com. Thanks, and hope to hear from you soon. Bless you all. Bye-bye.